What's good? It's Wood. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. We have Dmitry Bivol, 20 wins and 0 losses, defending his WBA light heavyweight title, and it's the super status of the WBA light heavyweight title against Gilberto Zurdo Ramirez, 44 wins and 0 losses. This is a battle of undefeated fighters, two of the better fighters in the division. Dmitry Bivol, obviously the longtime WBA light heavyweight champion, coming off the biggest win of his career against Canelo Alvarez, a very ambitious superstar. Canelo Alvarez trying to come up and earn the WBA belt at 175. Canelo obviously recently ran roughshod at 168, becoming undisputed champion there. And Gilberto Zurdo Ramirez is a former super middleweight champion, 168-pound champion. He held the WBO belt in that division for quite some time, and he was on Top Rank throughout his 168-pound career, and then signed with Golden Boy and has been pursuing bigger fights at 175 light heavyweight. So that opportunity, because, at Top Rank, 160 and 168, those are just not divisions where Top Rank in recent years have thrived. Like, they have kind of been starved for elite talent in those divisions. Other divisions, they're killing it. 135, 140, Top Rank's got it going on. But Gilberto Ramirez found himself without huge opportunities while on Top Rank at 168. So this is kind of a perfect storm for him, because at 175 with Golden Boy, who's got the deal with DAZN, well, who is the other outlet or promotional company who's got a deal with DAZN? That would be Matchroom. So Gilberto Ramirez, for him to find the opportunity that he's been pursuing at 175, it would have to happen with a Dmitry Bivol. And now that Bivol is coming off of the fight against Canelo, which is now elevating Dmitry Bivol's profile, like his star has never shined brighter than it is shining right now. This is just working perfectly for Zurdo Ramirez. So Dmitry Bivol, like, I remember him when he was fighting a lot on HBO, and he was just looking like a very good technical boxer, and he would be appearing on a lot of Sergey Kovalev undercards. So he went from beating, like the Cedric Agnews and Trent Broadhurst, where I think it was the Trent Broadhurst fight, which was a first round knockout. I think that was the fight that Dmitry Bivol became full light heavyweight champion for the WBA. He had won the belt initially a couple years prior, winning in an interim status. But by the time he was fighting Trent Broadhurst, he again was elevated to full WBA light heavyweight champion status. And so he defended successfully against Sullivan Barrera, Isaac Chilemba, who at one point gave Sergey Kovalev a good run for his money. And then Bivol defended against Jean Pascal, a multiple-time light heavyweight champ himself. And then against Joe Smith Jr., the very dangerous Joe Smith Jr., in a fight where Dmitry Bivol won the vast majority of the rounds, but did get hurt towards the end of the 10th round. And that was what you heard a lot of people mentioning before, Bivol stepped in the ring with Canelo, saying like, oh, did Bivol, really get rattled to where he hasn't truly recovered from getting rocked at the end of the 10th against Joe Smith Jr. And they were also using that as ammo when Joe Smith Jr. was trying to unify against Artur Beterbiev. It was just that moment where Joe Smith Jr. popped Dmitry Bivol at the end of the round, and you saw Bivol kind of steady himself by holding the rope and then walk back to his corner kind of shakily. Well, in that fight, Bivol won the vast majority of the rounds, and don't forget, towards the end of that fight, he had Joe Smith in all sorts of trouble. Look at the 12th round of Bivol versus Joe Smith. Anytime you want to think about the time that Joe Smith hurt Bivol, it was Bivol who was getting the last laugh and who was looking like, if this fight were to go those, championship rounds in the old days, rounds 13 through 15, it would have been Joe Smith who was more likely to get stopped than it would have been Dmitry Bivol. So after that fight against Joe Smith Jr., Dmitry Bivol has one more fight. It's against Lennon Castillo, the same Lennon Castillo who got his lights put out against Callum Smith pretty recently. So Dmitry Bivol won that one via unanimous decision, and then COVID hit. So he was out of the ring for about a year and a half, at least a year and a half. Comes back to fight Craig Richards, and this is a fight where Craig Richards won a few rounds against Dmitry Bivol, which is a little bit rare because Dmitry Bivol, while not a knockout artist, he's got 11 7 knockouts in his 20 wins. Dmitry Bivol is one of the best round winners in the sport, pound for pound. Like, you know how Devin Haney, Shakur Stevenson, there's certain guys who are just super gifted technicians to where they're winning just about every round they're involved in. Dmitry Bivol is more one of those types of fighters. So to see Craig Richards win multiple rounds against him, that had a lot of people saying, damn, is Dmitry Bivol the same? So Dmitry Bivol won that fight against Richards via unanimous decision, and we recently saw Craig Richards lose a close and competitive fight against Joshua Buatsi. But then Dmitry Bivol fought against Umar Salimov, you know, kind of an unknown light heavyweight, and Dmitry Bivol didn't look great in this fight. He did sort of dominate the fight. He won just about all of the rounds, but, you know, Salimov was a big fighter. I think he's like 6'3". Dmitry Bivol has kind of been on the smaller side of light heavyweight. He's about 6 foot even, maybe 6'1", but probably about 6 foot even. So he was outboxing Salimov, but he couldn't really put him away. So this was Dmitry Bivol's second post-COVID fight. After, you know, the fight with Craig Richards, he then beat Salimov. Then he had that showdown versus Canelo Alvarez. And people will forget, Canelo Alvarez was a huge favorite in this fight, and it was because he was looking so special at 168, not to mention he had knocked out Sergey Kovalev before that at 175, so he had that one fight at light heavyweight. But a lot of people thought that not only would Canelo beat Dmitry Bivol and take his WBA 175-pound title, but that Canelo would then pivot to fight Artur Beterbiev, because, you know, Canelo's got the flexibility of jumping from one promoter to the next. He's in that position of power. So a lot of people thought that he would pull it off where he beats Bivol and then fights Artur Beterbiev, assuming Beterbiev beats Joe Smith Jr., right? At the time, we weren't, you know, really sure who was going to win that fight. But the idea was that Canelo would not only become undisputed at 168, but that he would then become undisputed at 175. Well, Dmitry Bivol had other plans as he clearly outboxed Canelo. You know, once like the 5th round hit, and then I saw Canelo kind of resting against the ropes and waving Dmitry Bivol over, that told me, damn, Canelo is looking a little more disheveled and tired than normal, and he's kind of getting it put on him to where Dmitry Bivol would be coming in with the combinations, and it was Canelo who looked like he was looking for like a one-punch bomb. And it's like, if you're going to fight Dmitry Bivol, you better hit that home run or else you're not going to be winning majority of the rounds because, you know, unlike some of the other guys Canelo was fighting, Dmitry Bivol was so much bigger than Canelo and a very technical boxer. Like, this had as much to do with skill as it did with size. And Dmitry Bivol is a volume puncher, so he's a technician, but he's not somebody who's going to just, you know, throw one punch at a time and then move around and just look to load up on one punch. He's throwing enough combinations, which leads him to win the vast majority of the rounds in just about all of his fights. So, you know, he hasn't scored, he being Dmitry Bivol, hasn't scored a knockout since he stopped Sullivan Barrera in the final round back in 2018. So in his last like 7 fights, they have all been decision victories for Bivol, but they have all been unanimous decision victories for Dmitry Bivol. In fact, Dmitry Bivol does not have any split decision or majority decision wins. All of his decision wins are via unanimous decision. And this fight against Canelo, to our eyes, the viewers' eyes, it looked like Dmitry Bivol probably won 8 rounds, maybe even 9 rounds, but the judges had it 115 to 113, where if Dmitry Bivol, for instance, dropped the final round, this one could have been like a draw, a majority draw. Think about that. This was as big a travesty judging-wise as some of the fights where they actually rule in favor of the wrong fighter. The idea that this was a 115 to 113 fight is totally laughable. And sometimes those bad scorecards get swept under the rug if the right guy wins the fight. Well, yeah, no, don't let this one escape you. This was a poor demonstration of boxing judging in this fight because Dmitry Bivol won this one by at least a couple of rounds. But this was a huge moment. It was a big setback for Canelo where, you know, he then pivoted, had to handle business against, you know, Triple G, and we'll see where he goes next. I mean, he is still probably the biggest superstar in the sport of boxing. But Dmitry Bivol, this definitely spotlit his abilities and his skill set to where it's got way more eyes on Dmitry Bivol. I mean, he's come a long way since he was fighting on those Sergey Kovalev undercards. And now, people have just been wanting to see Artur Beterbiev versus Dmitry Bivol. But first, Dmitry Bivol has to handle business against his mandatory challenger, Gilberto Zurdo Ramirez, who again is a former 168-pound WBO belt holder, undefeated fighter, 44-0. That's very unusual, right? But out of those 44 wins, 30 have come via knockout. Now, the thing about that one is, I'm not going to say that he has a totally padded record, but if you look at his opponent quality, when he was scoring the majority of those knockouts, at least at 168, they were very early in his career. Like almost all of his wins were coming via knockout. But then when he started fighting like the Maxime Vlasovs, we remember Maxime Vlasov having that super competitive fight against Joe Smith Jr. for the vacant belt. Very, very close fight with Joe Smith Jr. Well, Maxime Vlasov fought Gilberto Ramirez to a decision loss. Gilberto Ramirez beat Maxime Vlasov, but aside from that, he started working up and fighting, slightly better opponents at 168, and then he started winning many more of these fights via decision and not by stoppage. So he won against former very good fighter Arthur Abraham, beat him via decision, had two very good fights against Jesse Hart, both very competitive fights. Gilberto Ramirez won the first via unanimous decision, and then the second of those fights against Hart via majority decision. Close fights, both via decision. And aside from that, who would his best, opponents be? Maybe Romer Alexis Angulo, maybe Fulgencio Zuniga before Gilberto Ramirez's WBO super middleweight title reign. But yeah, once he won the belt against Arthur Abraham, he defended it successfully 5 times. 2 of those 5 defenses was against Jesse Hart, maybe still his best opponent to date. Jesse Hart was, once upon a time pretty good, especially at 168. Not as effective at 175. We saw him, get beaten up and beaten via decision against Joe Smith Jr. But at the time, Gilberto Ramirez was fighting Jesse Hart. That was seen to be like a very competitive and good fight with 2 very good fighters. But after that rematch against Jesse Hart, Gilberto Ramirez kind of hit a fork in the road where he then was willing to drop his WBO super middleweight title because it was just kind of slim pickings from a opportunity standpoint. Then he got with Golden Boy, moved up to 175, and it's kind of interesting. Since moving to 175, now remember, Gilberto Ramirez in his last several fights at 168 was winning via decision. Since going to 175, he's won all of his fights via knockout or stoppage, and he's looked massive in the ring versus his opponents. It almost makes it unbelievable that the guy was able to cut to 168 just a few years ago. Now, his opponents at 175 have left a lot to be desired. He's beaten guys like Tommy Karpensi, Sullivan Barrera, Yuneski, Gonzalez. But if you look at that fight against Gonzalez, Gilberto Ramirez didn't look very good in that fight. He got hit a lot. He got rocked. He got punched super hard by Gonzalez. Rewatch that one. That one had me rethinking how good he could be at light heavyweight. He just wasn't showing a lot of the sweet science that he's shown in some of his other fights, and certainly not the same sweet science that you will often see from Dmitry Bivol in just about all of his fights. So he got tagged a lot by Gonzalez, but ended up stopping him in the 10th round, and then most recently fought an even lower grade opponent in Dominic Buzel, knocked him out in the 4th round, and Buzel had like nothing for Zurdo Ramirez. So that's his most, and then he fought like an aging Sullivan Barrera. So he did knock out Barrera in the 4th round, but this isn't the same Sullivan Barrera who was fighting, competitively with Dmitry Bivol back in the day, or the same Sullivan Barrera who beat Joe Smith Jr. A few years ago, broke his jaw in the process, broke Joe Smith Jr.'s jaw, not his own. But Gilberto Ramirez has been looking pretty scary at 175 against lesser opponents. So this fight against Dmitry Bivol, this is a huge step up at 175 for Zurdo Ramirez. And the people who do think that Zurdo could win are looking at his, his punching power, his size, his volume, and the fact that he's a lefty. So this is going to be an interesting matchup. Now, one thing about Zurdo Ramirez is, again, he's a southpaw, so he likes to throw that left straight hand to the body. Like, do not sleep on the body work. And I feel like him working the body is going to have to be a key ingredient against Dmitry Bivol here, because exchange for exchange, Dmitry Bivol is such a master at like range control. And in terms of timing, Dmitry Bivol, to me, he's got the edge in this one. Like in terms of just like the distance at range, boxing tit for tat, Dmitry Bivol has better footwork, takes better angles. They both have good volume, but I think that, and they're both pretty accurate in punching. I think Dmitry Bivol might have slightly faster hands. And I think Dmitry Bivol is a lot better defensively. So Zurdo Ramirez, I think, is going to have to beat Dmitry Bivol up to the body, especially with that straight left. It's a hard punch to the body. And he's going to have to basically just keep on walking through hell to basically put the volume on Dmitry Bivol and to make this more of a fight than a boxing exhibition. Zurdo Ramirez is going to have to make this not so much a brawl, but he's going to have to turn up the temperature and make this a little bit more of a firefight to get to Dmitry Bivol. Because I think that if he tries to box him at range and tries to out-sweet science him, I think he's going to lose on the scorecard, something like 8 rounds to 4, 9 rounds to 3. I think there's a high likelihood that Dmitry Bivol might make Gilberto Ramirez look like Bernard Hopkins and Sergio Martinez made Kelly Pavlik look. I don't know if y'all remember those fights, but they basically were just taking angles and made Kelly Pavlik look a little heavy-footed in the angles that they were taking. I think that Dmitry Bivol is going to have to, I think Dmitry Bivol's got a pretty good chin. And the thing is, he doesn't get hit hard very often. But at the same time, Gilberto Ramirez is not Canelo Alvarez. Yes, pound for pound, Canelo is a much better fighter than Gilberto Ramirez. But Gilberto Ramirez is so much bigger than Canelo. Canelo's about 5'8", 5'9" on a good day, but probably 5'8" to be fair. And then Gilberto Ramirez is like 6'3". Sometimes he's listed at 6'4". Although I think that it would be more accurate to gauge him at about 6'2.5", maybe 6'3". So he's going to have a couple inches in height advantage over Dmitry Bivol. But I just have so much respect for Dmitry Bivol's defensive ability and his angle taking. But I think that he's going to get beaten up in this fight probably more than he's gotten beaten up in any fight in the past. Like, Dmitry Bivol has been, like, just passing all of his fights with flying colors. I mean, again, he's undefeated. Both of these guys are undefeated. But Dmitry Bivol, you would be hard-pressed to find a lot of fights where he loses more than 2 rounds. And I just think that if Craig Richards was able to push Dmitry Bivol as much as he did, granted, that was a fight off of, the COVID layoff, we'll say. It was like a 1.5 year long layoff. Craig Richards' performance against Dmitry Bivol and the idea that Salamov was able to stick around, although he was losing round after round, makes me think that Gilberto Ramirez is going to be very, very competitive against Dmitry Bivol. Not to mention, Gilberto Ramirez has been starving for opportunity for so long that this is his moment. This is his chance. This is what him and Golden Boy were kind of game planning, an opportunity like this against Dmitry Bivol. So, I think that this fight is going to look, I think that it's going to be like a 7 rounds to 5 type of fight either way. By the way, I can conceivably see Gilberto Ramirez just putting it on Dmitry Bivol kind of late in the fight. Maybe even knocking him down or just overwhelming him with the size, power, and activity. I just think that it's more likely that Dmitry Bivol, being the slightly more skilled boxer, and the thing is, Gilberto Ramirez is a skilled boxer. But I think that it takes fights like these to see the difference in level. Like Dmitry Bivol, I look at as being like an A level boxer, whereas Gilberto Ramirez, A-, maybe B+, just in terms of like the boxing IQ, sweet science. I think Gilberto Ramirez is going to get good instruction from his corner. They're going to keep on employing him to work the body. But it's not like Gilberto Ramirez has to do a lot to get into range, because for Dmitry Bivol to be in range means that he's already within Gilberto Ramirez's range. Again, Gilberto Ramirez has a size and reach advantage. I just have a lot of faith in Dmitry Bivol's abilities in boxing. Like there are a lot of indicators that have been tempting me to pick Zurdo Ramirez in this one, probably via decision, although I could maybe see him getting the stoppage. I just think that Dmitry Bivol is going to pull this one off, like something like 7 rounds to 5, 8 rounds to 4. I do think that this is going to be a close fight. I just think that the current WBA light heavyweight champ is going to come through with yet another successful title defense. And some of that, it does have to do with Gilberto Ramirez's opponent quality at 175 to this point. I think that he might get his ears boxed off in a few moments of this fight, but I think he's going to have a lot of competitive, very competitive moments. I think he's going to win rounds here. I'm just going with Dmitry Bivol, something like 7 rounds to 5, 8 rounds to 4, but I do think it's going to be a unanimous decision, not a split decision. So yeah, let me know what you think about Bivol versus Gilberto Ramirez. This is probably one of the 2 or 3 fights that I'm looking forward to the most in these closing months of 2022. Another one would probably be Jose Zepeda versus Regis Prograis. That's another one I'm really looking forward to. But I'm going Dmitry Bivol via very close and competitive, but somewhat clear decision victory over the very dangerous and very motivated Gilberto Zurdo Ramirez. I wouldn't be totally surprised with an upset here, though. This one is pretty interesting. But please let me know your thoughts on Bivol versus Ramirez in the comments. Also, what do you think the likelihood is? If Dmitry Bivol beats Zurdo Ramirez, which is more likely, that he pivots and fights Canelo next, or that he waits for Beterbiev versus Anthony Yard and then tries to work out a battle for undisputed with the very dangerous, the destructive force in the division, but still an aging Artur Beterbiev? Which is more likely in Dmitry Bivol's future if he gets past Zurdo Ramirez? Difficult task, difficult test. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. I'm Woog. Thanks for tuning in.